Imagine waking up one day and realizing that everything you know, every memory, every image, every belief, is not what it seems. That the reality you trust is a carefully crafted illusion, a shadow of something that no longer exists. It's not just about fake news, propaganda, or the digital metaverse. It's deeper, insidious. What if, at its core, our world isn't real? Not in the sense of it being a simulation in a sci-fi sense, but as something more unsettling. What if we are living in a copy of a copy where the original has been lost, or maybe it never even existed? Welcome to the realm of simulacra and simulation, where the lines between reality and illusion are not just blurred, they're erased entirely. Let's dive into a reality you may never have questioned until now. Picture this: a small French village in the 17th century. In the town square stands a grand cathedral, towering over cobblestone streets. Inside, sunlight filters through stained glass, illuminating the faces of saints carved into the stone. To the villagers, this church is a bridge between the mortal and the divine, a representation of their faith, a reminder of God's presence in their lives. Centuries pass, wars rage, empires fall. That cathedral is now gone, reduced to rubble. But its image lives on. It's preserved in paintings, replicated in architectural blueprints, printed on postcards. People no longer need the actual church. They have the idea of it, the representation. Fast forward to today. A modern tourist steps into a theme park that's reconstructed the cathedral brick by brick. She marvels at its grandeur. She takes selfies, posts them online, and captions them, "Faith through the ages." But here's the twist: she's never been to the original. In fact, neither has anyone alive today. All that remains is this replica. In this moment, we see the seductive power of the simulacra, a representation that replaces the original, erasing its need. What once pointed to something real now exists only for itself. The copy becomes the reality, and the original is forgotten. Jean Baudrillard described this strange phenomenon in his work Simulacra and Simulation. To understand it, we first need to grasp his idea of representation. He outlined 4 stages that take us from reality to simulation. Number 1. Faithful representation. This is where it all begins. The representation reflects a deep reality, a photograph of the original cathedral, a painting of a real landscape. It's a mirror of truth. Number 2. Distortion of reality. Next comes the tweak. The representation starts to exaggerate or distort. Think of religious paintings that don't just reflect faith but amplify it, adding halos, divine light, and expressions of pure ecstasy. Number 3. Masking the absence of reality. Here's where it gets tricky. The representation no longer reflects reality but begins to mask the fact that the original might be gone. Imagine the cathedral reduced to ashes, yet its image lives on in photographs, books, and videos as though it's still standing. Number 4. Pure simulation. Finally, we arrive at the most unsettling stage, when the representation no longer points to anything real. It exists only as its own reality. The theme park cathedral doesn't need the original. It becomes real for those who visit it, even though it's a hollow shell of something long lost. In this final stage, we're left with a world where simulacra reigns supreme, a hyperreality where truth and fiction dissolve into one. Take a moment to look around you. What's real? Is it your coffee mug, the clothes that you're wearing? Now think about those objects. The coffee mug might be emblazoned with a logo, an image representing a brand, a lifestyle, an idea. The brand doesn't care about the mug's function. Its purpose is to sell an identity. The same goes for your clothes, your car, and your phone. When Baudrillard described the desert of the real, he wasn't referring to some apocalyptic wasteland. He was talking about this, our world of infinite images and symbols, where what's real becomes secondary, even irrelevant. Take fashion for example. In the past, clothes served a purpose: warmth, protection, modesty. Today it's a statement, a projection of identity. The meaning of clothes has shifted from their function to their image. A designer handbag isn't about carrying essentials. It's about signaling wealth, taste, and status. This isn't just consumerism. It's the collapse of reality into simulation. And it's everywhere. The real is no longer tangible. It's an idea, a concept engineered to sell, to seduce, to replicate endlessly. If everything around us is a copy of a copy, where does that leave us? Have we lost our grip on reality? Baudrillard believed we might have. In his view, the world of Simulacra doesn't just deceive us, it changes us. Consider social media, where life is curated into filtered snapshots and soundbites. Are we sharing our reality, or are we simulating a version of ourselves we want others to believe in? And if everyone is doing the same, what happens to the real us? Baudrillard warned that in a world dominated by simulation, authenticity becomes irrelevant. We stop seeking the truth and instead chase the most convincing illusion. What happens when the symbols we create to represent reality start to replace it? This is the heart of Baudrillard's argument, a process he refers to as simulation. He didn't mean the immersive virtual realities of video games or the futuristic dystopias of Hollywood films. Instead, Baudrillard described how modern society increasingly relies on representations, symbols, signs, and images to construct our understanding of the world. But these representations no longer point to anything real. In Baudrillard's world, a map doesn't just depict the territory, it begins to replace it. Imagine a map so detailed, so all-encompassing, that it covers every inch of the terrain it represents. Over time, the terrain itself erodes, but the map remains, convincing everyone it is the terrain. The reality beneath, forgotten, irrelevant, erased. This is what Baudrillard called the procession of simulacra. In simpler terms, it's when the copy precedes and defines what we think of as reality. It's not that we're living in a dream, it's that the dream has become indistinguishable from waking life. And in this dream, everything, culture, identity, even truth itself, becomes a simulation. Take something as seemingly innocent as money. Once upon a time, a dollar represented a tangible thing, a bar of gold in a vault, a measure of physical labor. But now, a dollar is just a piece of paper, or worse, a digital number floating in cyberspace. It no longer represents anything concrete. Its value is sustained purely by belief, a collective simulation we've all agreed to participate in. If everyone suddenly stopped believing in money, the entire system would crumble overnight. That's the terrifying power of simulacra, and it doesn't stop there. Media, Baudrillard argued, is the most potent engine of simulation. News programs claim to deliver reality, but what they really provide is a carefully curated narrative. Social media takes this even further, turning every user into a self-curated brand. Are we sharing our lives, or are we constructing simulations of ourselves, polished and edited to reflect an idealized version of reality? This collapse isn't just a philosophical abstraction. Baudrillard saw it as the defining condition of modern life. He famously claimed that the Gulf War did not take place, not because bombs didn't fall or lives weren't lost, but because the war's representation, its simulacra on 24-hour news cycles, video feeds, and military briefings, became more real to the public than the war itself. The event was consumed not as a lived reality, but as a media spectacle, a narrative of clean, clinical precision that sanitized the chaos and horror on the ground. If simulation is the process, then hyperreality is the result. Hyperreality, according to Baudrillard, is a state where the distinction between real life and the simulated dissolves entirely. It's a world where the copy doesn't just replace the real, it becomes more real than the real. Consider Disneyland. On the surface, it's a theme park, a place for escapism and fun. But Baudrillard saw it as something much more darker, a microcosm of hyperreality. Disneyland doesn't just create fantasy worlds, it perpetuates the illusion that the world outside its gates is real by contrast. But is it? Or has the entirety of modern life become a Disneyland of its own? A carefully constructed simulation designed to distract us from the absence of any authentic reality. Or think about reality TV. Shows like Big Brother or The Real Housewives claim to depict real life, but every interaction is shaped by the presence of cameras, producers, and the knowledge that millions are watching. These shows aren't documenting reality, they're scripting it. Yet to the audience, they feel more immediate, more entertaining, more real than reality itself. This is hyperreality in action, a world where the line between the real and the artificial is not just blurred, but obliterated. So where does this leave us? For Baudrillard, living in a world of simulation and simulacra is both liberating and terrifying. On one hand, the collapse of the real frees us from the constraints of traditional notions of truth and authenticity. In the simulacrum, you can be whoever you want, craft whatever narrative suits you, and inhabit multiple realities simultaneously. But this freedom comes at a cost. If everything is a simulation, then what can we trust? What anchors us to the world? In a universe of endless copies, the original, the real, is lost forever, and with it perhaps our sense of purpose and meaning. Baudrillard didn't offer solutions. He didn't tell us how to escape the simulacrum, because for him there is no escape. The world of simulation isn't a glitch in the system, it is the system. The only question is whether we can learn to navigate it without losing ourselves entirely. Jean Baudrillard's vision of simulation and simulacra is haunting, provocative, and even disturbingly prescient. It forces us to question everything we take for granted about reality, truth, and identity. Are we living in a world of our own making? Or are we prisoners of a simulation so vast and intricate that we no longer see its edges? The simulacrum is not a distant, theoretical concept. It's the air we breathe, the screens we stare into, the narratives we construct and consume. It's the infinite mirror reflecting copies of copies, a labyrinth with no center, no origin, and no escape. Baudrillard may not have given us answers, but he gave us a map not to reality but to the simulacrum itself, and perhaps, in tracing its contours, we can begin to understand the strange, hyper-real world we call home.